Welcome, 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 everyone. You have arrived. Thank you for joining us on Eye on Privacy. This is the June installment of our monthly webinar series with TRU Staffing Partners. And we're going to talk all about the data privacy job market today, provide the community with some updated statistics as to what is happening in real time in the data privacy job market. And things have changed a lot. These are some of the things we like to cover every month. We will cover some of these things. We also have an exciting guest speaker with us, as we do every month. But before we introduce our amazing guest speaker, if you haven't already downloaded our 2024 Data Privacy Jobs Report, please do so today. A lot of the statistics that we are going to go over today are in this and unpacked with much greater detail in our data privacy jobs report. It is a great resource for hiring managers who are looking for benchmarks on much more than just salary, but salary is included in there. Benchmarks on all sorts of different variables that now impact everyone's ability to hire effectively in a post-COVID environment. We are going to share with you some of the metrics from that report today, but we're also going to update you on what's changed since 2023 and what's been happening more or less for the first half of 2024. I am joined today by someone who I've become a huge fan of online and had the great pleasure of collaborating with in preparation for this webinar. Jay Averitt, who is a senior privacy product manager out of Microsoft. If you are not following Jay on LinkedIn, I highly recommend it. He is a thoughtful and articulate contributor of content for the community on things related specifically to privacy engineering, but really privacy broadly as a profession, as a discipline, as a practice, and as a passion. It is my great pleasure to introduce and work together today with Jay Averitt. Jay, say hello to everybody.
Hey, everyone. It's really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and look forward to discussing with you today, Jared.
Awesome. Let's dive right in, Jay. I know we've got a lot to talk about. So we always start this webinar with some quick bullets as to what is happening that's new in the month of June and has changed as a result of the activity that we've been witnessing and participating in the job market in May. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today, just so that everybody has a little bit of sense of some of the nuance that I think Jay can bring in terms of perspective, we're going to talk a lot about privacy engineering and the privacy engineering market. We will talk about all privacy at large, but as you can see, privacy engineering job openings have increased. In 2023, they were about 10% of the overall market in terms of global jobs available specifically for privacy engineers. That is now up by almost 50% to 15% of the available jobs that we see being advertised on a global level. So there's definitely an increased demand for privacy engineers. Here's the difference, though. More than half of those jobs are contract positions. And this is very different than what we saw in 21 and 22 in terms of the modality in which hiring managers are acquiring talent. And Jay, I know that we've seen a lot out of big tech in terms of both layoffs and adding to staff from a talent perspective as it relates to engineers. Would love to hear your perspective on why do you think we see so much contract staffing specifically in the engineering marketplace right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think just discussing with my friends at other tech companies and just looking at the market as a whole, I mean, I feel like companies are just trying to get a handle on, exactly where I think ever since 2022 and all the layoffs happened there, tech has kind of slowly been building back up. So they're not really willing to make those long-term commitments right out the gate, just because they're kind of worried. They don't want a repeat of what happened, where there was all this downsizing that happened in 2022. And so a way of sort of playing against that in 24 is contract work, where you can get everybody who's ever worked in privacy, so you can get folks in the door quickly to start performing work without having the long-term commitment and having the potential of future layoffs.
I think it's opportunistic too, Jay. I don't think before 2020 you could have gotten privacy engineering contractors so easily. It's not so easy today either. It's very competitive for that talent, but there is a corpus of available people, particularly ones that have big tech experience that might have been victims of some of these layoffs that are available now in a contract capacity that just simply weren't available 4 or 5 years ago. And that corpus of availability has turned companies that maybe aren't in big tech to look opportunistically to augmenting with some of that talent while they can. Now, the challenge here for a lot of privacy engineers are they were commanding salaries maybe in the, two, three, 400 plus $1,000 a year in big tech. And a lot of these companies are not offering that. So what we've had a lot of success doing with particularly very accomplished and seasoned engineers that are available on contract is they're working multiple contracts at the same time. And that multiplicity sometimes exceeds the earning potential that they had in a full-time position from a cash comp perspective. Companies are now more willing to negotiate on remote flexibility for privacy engineers than they are lawyers, operations, or leadership positions. And this is where the engineering marketplace in privacy has really stood out to us, Jay. And I just would love to hear your comment on how you see the culture of engineering and privacy differ from those other subject matter expertises or different kind of areas of vertical within privacy, and why employers are more permissive for engineers than they are others.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly true. I know I have quite a few friends that are privacy attorneys, and they're asking me, where do I find a remote work? And there's a few places where I think they can find it, but it's it's not out there. And I don't know if it's I think engineering in general is just more permissive of remote work. They got kind of on board with it, and the pandemic, and now it's just kind of carried over where folks all work got done there and that. But I guess in legal and in other places, it's just it's kind of that mentality of we get more work done by having butts in the seat. Whether or not that actually is the case or not sure, but definitely I know there are remote privacy lawyer jobs out there, but it seems like those are, especially in big tech, harder and harder to find these days. There's a lot more openness to that. And I think, why there might be more openness to remote and privacy engineering is just there's not, while you're right that the corpus is certainly stronger of available privacy engineers, they're not prevalent everywhere. I saw one, for example, I saw a job description in a big tech company recently where they were looking specifically for somebody in Seattle or the Bay Area. And I was friends with the hiring manager, and they said they just weren't getting they weren't getting anybody there. So they had to open it up to remote because, to find those people. So I think one, yes, there are more privacy engineers available, but there's still not enough in the concentrated areas where there are offices to hire specifically on that. And I just think there's sort of a mentality difference between legal folks and engineering.
We're going to show a map in a second that comes actually from data that we pulled from LinkedIn that shows you a heat map of where engineer jobs are located and where engineers are generally located. It's interesting to hear they had trouble finding someone in the Bay Area because that's where most of these people are located. However, they may be pricing out of the compensation that companies are willing to pay for engineers in full-time positions in those areas, which is definitely something that we have seen in terms of trending. All right. 42%. So we're talking a lot about contracting. I think it's an important statistic, and this has essentially been more or less the same statistic for the last 30, 60 days. 42% of our contractors who started assignments in 2023, meaning from January 1 to present of January 2023, have been offered direct hire conversions. And I've said this a few times on webinars. This is an astronomically high ratio. Normally, it's around 8 to 12% of contractors get offered conversions. And this is definitely signaling to us that the use of contractors isn't just because we have short-term impact projects or we only have part-time work. It's because they're not getting full-time headcount from their employers. And this is the way that they're advocating to get that full-time headcount, is by converting somebody who's on staff making a contribution as opposed to evangelizing a role that has yet to be filled and no one has yet made an impact, but it is necessary to the business. And I think that we've seen a lot of our customers have tremendous success with this approach, as opposed to fighting tooth and nail to get full-time headcount, which many of them are not able to get right now. And so we really want to encourage people to think about that, both on the job seeker and the hiring manager side. A lot of job seekers for the first part of 2023 were very reticent to consider contract opportunities because they thought the market would pop back very quickly, and it hasn't. This may be your road to full-time employment, maybe the best road to full-time employment. We also track the amount of days before this 42% get offered conversions. And what we found is the average number of days is 228. So if you're a job seeker who's out there saying, okay, well, how long can I expect until I'm likely to get offered a conversion? Or if you're a hiring manager that's saying to yourself, how long can I expect before this person might be getting other offers? What we found, generally speaking, is around 228 days. What we have found is with the very 2 to 3% of our contractors who actually leave contracts before they're finished, wind up leaving at around 260 days because they got full-time work somewhere else. So when you're thinking about how much time do I have, this is the stat right now. I'll share with everybody that that stat in 2022 was 156 days, right? That's almost, 100 days shorter. There were also a lot less people. It was not 42%. It was more like 18, 19%. That number will fluctuate based on job market conditions. As there become fewer and fewer contractors available, which will continue to happen over time, and there becomes more demand for full-time professionals, which will also continue to happen over time, that timeline will shorten. People will get other opportunities faster, and people will want to retain the talent that they've got on contract faster than they are right now. So this number, I think, goes down over time, not up. Jay, any comments on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that completely makes sense. What I've seen. I think that in 2022 there was no reason for anybody that had their background to consider a contract position, because there were so many positions out there that it just wasn't needed. And if you could get the full-time with benefits, then great. But now I think it's just a different market where and also I think contracts a great way to kind of tow your way into a situation. I know some people that prefer working on a contract basis because they kind of want to fill out the environment before like making a commitment and then having to make a switch. So I think it could kind of work for both parties involved in the right
100%.
situation.
And look, 36% of Americans are working in the gig economy. So this is more than a third of the employed professionals in our workforce are on a contract. So I think the job seekers have become much more willing to explore this. And we often have people leave full-time jobs for contract jobs because of the nature of the opportunity or the growth potential that it has, or the additional perspective it gives them in the market that they haven't had before professionally. We've got a quick question here I want to answer before we move on to some of our statistics for the month. It says, good afternoon. What advice do you have for attorneys who are switching practice areas to the field of privacy? And what is the best way to get experience and get your foot in the door? I have a few quick tips. And we want to encourage anybody that has more questions, please put them in the Q&A channel, not the chat channel, the Q&A channel, and we will answer them to the best of our ability in real time. My advice is kind of threefold. The first is you need to build a professional network. It's really important for you to have people who know you, people that follow you, people who you follow, people you can turn to at advice. Credibility is 90% visibility. So, be out there, right? Take Jay as a beautiful example. Jay's not afraid to put himself out there. And because Jay put himself out there, I saw him and I've become a fan of Jay's, and I wanted to work with Jay, right? The same thing goes for somebody trying to break into the space. You got to put yourself out there. You got to be visible, and that's how you'll build that network. And the final is you've got to get some training and education and show self-investment. If you're changing expertise, there are a lot of different avenues to go get that education in the privacy space. I'd be curious to hear what Jay's guidance is on some of the best training for a lawyer transitioning from his perspective. But not just the actual education, I think the self-initiative, right? If you're transitioning and you're asking an employer to invest in you in an area that you're not proven in yet professionally, you have to self-invest because employers are more likely, especially in this economy, to invest in people who invest in themselves than they are to take a chance on somebody who's asking for the employer to take all the risk. Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd echo everything you said. Particularly, I think you're right. I mean, I think putting yourself out there, you're going to connect with others in the space. And I don't know. I put a post up the other day about how great privacy folks are, and I got to say, they really are. I mean, extremely welcoming, and you can learn a lot by just connecting with the community. But yeah, I mean, and I think certifications like the IAPP offer are certainly a way of proving your interest and proving and giving you a baseline level of knowledge to make that transition. I think it's easier. I think it's easier to make that transition if you're already in something that's sort of in a regulatory capacity. Like I think healthcare attorneys can make that switch, or potentially like labor and employment, or those because you're already dealing with law regulations. So privacy is very regulation heavy. So I think you can make that jump easy. If you're not in those, I'd say just find ways of getting experience in privacy, and that doesn't necessarily have to be uh, something that you're paid to do. You could look for even ways of volunteering at different privacy organizations, or working on like an open source project as the privacy expert. So I always feel like certifications are great. Real life experience is better. Anything you can do to do that, and like especially if you're in house already, if you reach out to your privacy folks, I mean, nobody's going to say, "Hey, we couldn't use your help on your project,"
That's right.
because I think anytime you can just get any kind of experience, and you might be able to do that exactly where you are, it's always a good thing.
Most even immature organizations as it relates to privacy have a privacy champion program or an evangelism program. Volunteer, put your hand up. Great advice. MT, let's get into our statistics here. We've got about 13 minutes left. These are from our jobs report, and this is where the jobs were in 2023. Just reflecting back on our first comment, you could see 10% were engineers. You could see how many were still attorneys and counsel, right? The bulk of the marketplace, 35% attorneys and counsels, a lot of consultants out there, program managers and directors, a little less on the analyst engineering side, and the fewest amount in sales and at the CPO level. Not terribly surprising, because we saw so much CPO hiring in 17, 18, 19, and even 20, 21, and 22. And that really has slowed down for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is people are hiring from the bottom up, not the top down, in a post 2022 kind of Zuckerberg lays off 10,000 people, everyone follows suit. We think we're going to go into a recession and then ducked. So this is where we're seeing jobs by position. This has changed a little bit recently, but not much. Engineering is up, program manager, director is down, attorney counsel is about the same, and consultant is up a little bit. Here we have compensations. This actually has not changed hardly at all over the last 6 months. This is pretty much still the same. As you can see here, it's reflective of the position diversity, meaning very hard to break into privacy if you don't have any experience. There are not a lot of jobs at 50 to 75, and not a lot at the top at north of 250. Over 75% of the jobs are between $100,000 and $250,000 a year. That's a lot, right? That is a big portion of the marketplace. And I would say the bulk of those are more in that 1 to 150 range, as you can see here at 1 to 175. Most of those are in the 150 range, to give you a sense of kind of, because I know 100 to 175 is a big range. Jay, anything here that surprises you or stands out as compelling, or that you would anticipate would change dramatically as we head into 2025?
No, I mean, I think it'll be more of the same. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I think you're right that there is sort of more hiring done at lower levels now than there are at senior levels, and I think especially in big tech, companies are also looking broader geographically than they were before, where there were huge focus just in the U.S. For privacy folks, but now I think companies are looking, hey, maybe we can save more money looking broader geographically. So I think that's it. As salaries continue to climb higher and higher in the U.S., I think you'll see more and more of that kind of shifting geographically to cheaper places.
Agreed. MT, let's take a look at our next data here. We do a quick organizational breakdown. You could see 75% of the jobs are in-house at corporate. A big decline on hiring at law firms and consulting firms in 2023. This was only about, corporate was only about 60% in 21 and 22. We've seen corporate now be the primary place where privacy people are getting hired, mainly because providers are dialing back, whether they're outside counsel or service providers, consulting firms, software companies are dialing back the hiring of talent. And then finally, geography. You can see here an uptick in India, a nice diversity. What is not included in this is what we would call the standard DPO position of Europe. We've sort of thrown that out for a lot of reasons, and some people in the industry can argue with me about it online later. We see DPOs in Europe as more of an audit function, and the salaries there are between 40 and 60,000 euro a year, which is very low. And so we just sort of thrown that out to give you a sense of here's the ecosystem of jobs, that we would consider non-entry level from a compensation perspective. MT, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to go on to this next one because this is the slide I mentioned earlier. Jay, we did a search on LinkedIn. This is where the corpus of privacy engineers are physically located, right? So this isn't true data. This is actually taken from LinkedIn Insights, which is a service they provide to agencies like myself. And if you know how to use it properly, and you're not just searching by, title, which we are not, we get a nice corpus of seeing here where the talent is. And I think it speaks to what you said earlier, right? If you're offshoring, you're going somewhere to a low-cost provider in Europe. That's what most of those dots are. India, same thing. But most engineering is happening here in the States if it's not being offshored for a cost motivation. And most of it is on the coasts, with a little bit sprinkled in the Southeast and Texas, but most of it is on the coasts. I mean, we see very little, even in Chicago, in terms of a corpus, where we're talking about single-digit people that are self-identifying that are physically based in Chicago, which is unusual, right? Very unusual. So this kind of points to what we said earlier about why are engineering jobs so more willing to be remote? You can't get people in an office that don't exist, that don't live there, and people are definitely not willing to relocate or pay to have somebody relocate in this marketplace. And so, yeah, that's part of the reason why we see so many of these jobs remote. I'm curious if you have any additional color for this statistic, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, when I go to whenever I'm like, for example, I was at the privacy engineering conference in the Bay Area in Santa Clara, and almost universally everybody that I was running into was either in the Bay Area or Seattle, with New York and DC, a few here and there. But yeah, there's a huge concentration of that. So it makes sense that if you're hiring in Chicago, it's going to be very tough to get somebody in the office in Chicago.
You're hiring in London, it can be tough to get somebody to go into the office, right? I mean, we don't see a big blue dot over London even. So this is very interesting. It also signals that offshoring is happening. It is definitely happening. People are definitely looking for offshore low-cost engineering solutions, which was not the case 5 to 7 years ago. Certainly not as big of dots that we see now in India and in parts of Eastern Europe. Let's take a look at the next slide, MT. Here's our contract versus direct hiring statistic. And this is based on offers that we're tracking that actually get accepted. So not offers extended, not jobs that are posted, but we're trying to track the movement of actually people who've accepted positions. And what we've seen has been astronomically in favor of contractors. 65% of jobs that we're tracking that were taken so far have been contract. They're not all being advertised as contractors, but at the end of the day, they are not on the company's payroll that they are working for. They are on a third-party payroll. This is the highest it's ever been. Even in 2020, when we were in an uncertainty based on the pandemic conditions of COVID, we still didn't see it at 65%. This is a massive switch for the marketplace. There is more than twice the amount of opportunity available contract than there is full-time in privacy. And we think this will probably stay the same until the end of the year. What we expect to happen in 2025 is almost a reversal of fortune, right? The market will run out of contractors that are available at a certain point, probably at the beginning of the year, because they'll all get gobbled up. If 42% are getting, converted, those jobs are getting filled. What's left? Well, I got to hire full-time in order to get these people to leave contract, or in order to attract people away from a full-time job. We think the market will switch. We think it'll be about 60-40 in favor of full-time in 2025. But the adoption of contracting as a primary modality for augmenting talent and privacy programs throughout the world is now going to become, we believe, a regular practice, and something that is not driven purely by economic conditions, but rather by opportunistic ones and building diversity, whether it's cultural diversity, talent diversity, geographic diversity, time zone diversity, follow the sun coverage, whatever the motivation may be in terms of diversifying your program with talent. Contracting will be a means with which people explore on a regular basis. Jay, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, no, not really. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that you think that they'll kind of run out of potential contractors being able there because of all the conversions. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what companies do in that situation and where we go from there.
What they've done traditionally is they start raising what they're willing to pay for full-time professionals. And we've seen the market, we're going to go into salaries in a second. We've seen the market pull back a little bit on comp. And so we think it'll move forward again when it needs to, when employers are no longer able to attract talent. And right now, what we're seeing, as I mentioned earlier, is employers are not willing to start paying more money yet. Not really. What they are willing to do is give more flexibility. And that's a change. That's something we did not see for the first 6 months of the year. And we're starting to see it now. Just in the last 2 days, we've had 3 or 4 customers be like, okay, we're going to go from 2 days a week to 1 day a week. If they can come in 1 day a week, and that changes the availability of talent dramatically when you drop from 3 to 2 to 1 day. I mean, you can get 10 times the amount of people interested at 1 day than you would 3 days a week in an office. 42% we covered. 95% of the 42% said yes. So not only are people getting offers, they're accepting them, which is also an astronomically high ratio. And again, the amount of days is 228. We've only got a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to speed of hire. We could go through this very quickly, Jay. Here's what you're going to see is kind of everybody. And MT, we can kind of fast forward because we just want to get to the privacy engineering piece. That's the piece I really want to touch on with Jay. You can see here privacy engineering really picked up speed in Q4 and has actually been a lot faster than it had been kind of, erratically earlier. That's because these jobs are contract. And you can see, or half of them are contract. And you can see that blue line at the bottom is contracting. Contracting is happening even faster. We're having engineers go out on interviews. It's 1/2 hour interview and they're getting an offer. That's how fast customers are moving on talent right now when they need it. So that kind of combination of engineering versus contracting, that mix is actually making the hiring process move a lot faster. I know we wanted to get to the money for everybody. Yeah, motivations. All right, we can click through this quickly because I want to get to the money. Everybody's burnt out right now. That's the short kind of statistic. That has not changed in the last 6 months. Privacy professionals are being overworked. They're understaffed, and they're motivated to go looking for jobs for that reason. That's the number one reason. Jay, I know you appreciated kind of our organization of this data. Any thoughts on how this might change in your mind as we head into the future?
No, I mean, it seems like you said, it hasn't changed much over the past year or so. And I don't know if it'll change a lot more. I think what I've seen over like in 22 essentially, I saw people getting hired at really, really high salaries. And the people that I know that got hired at those super high salaries in 2022 aren't leaving because there's nowhere for them to go to replicate where they are financially. So I think right now, I think all the numbers or at least the numbers that I'm familiar with the market are accurate. But I think that I think companies are tending to hire at lower levels or cheaper geographical areas just to kind of yes, we need people, but we're just kind of there's just been a pullback since 2022. But I do think that I've seen a lot more hiring in 24 than I did last year. So I'm hoping that continues and those numbers continue to rise.
100%. To give you a very specific metric, we tracked that there were around, I think it was 44,000 privacy jobs in 2022 that were posted. And in 2023, that number dropped to 19,000. So a 56% decrease in the amount of available positions. And look, it makes sense, right? We were in 21, 22 are called the Great Resignation years for a good reason. And when you turn over a third to three quarters of your staff, you're going to pay whatever it takes to replace those people. And the average increase in salaries for people represented by TRU in 2022 was between 20 and 40%. So people were getting meaningful, as you mentioned, Jay, meaningful increases if they moved jobs in 2022. You're right. These ranges, employers are leaning on the lower end of the ranges that you see here for their primary hiring needs. I'm of the mind we're going to start to see that change for a lot of reasons, which we'll unpack on our next webinar next week. We're at the half hour. Do we have any other data that we had planned to share with everybody, MT? No, just here's more information for all of you. You can download our 2024 Data Privacy Jobs Report here. You can join future Eye on Privacy webinars with us, where we always have another guest host. You can contact us on LinkedIn. We've got lots of information about how people are using contractors, how to get budget and buy-in. We'll take 2 minutes and go over to take a few of these questions, if that's okay with you, Jay. And then we'll close up very quickly. So, Maureen Thomas, thank you for your question. What are the best ways you would say privacy professionals can build their privacy network? Jay?
I mean, I think one, look for folks that I think there's a couple of different ways you can do it. One, there's, in-person IAP events that you can connect with. They tend to happen at least once a month, even in smaller IAPP chapters, so you can connect with folks in real time there. But also, not everybody's great at in-person connections. Like I said, I think privacy people are very receptive to networking. So if you see somebody at the job you want, reach out to that person and say, hey, how'd you get there? And most of the time, the person's more than willing to share their story. And, you've made that connection, and, who knows what might happen down the line.
Great advice. I was hesitant to ask this next question because I know it can take us down a rabbit hole, and we're going to answer this swiftly. Considering as AI is so new, are there a lot of jobs out there for AI strategists, specialists, or ops people? And how do privacy professionals build the bridge and leverage their experience? Great question, Jay. I'll let you take the first stab.
Yeah, I think, to answer the question pointedly, there are jobs out there for folks in AI governance and responsible AI, and there seems to be an increasing amount of jobs in that space. And I think privacy folks are apt to actually be able to get that experience, since it's so closely related to privacy right now, and no one has a super amount of experience in that. So I think just read what's out there, put your foot in the water, and get what experience you can, and then apply for those jobs.
I would say this, there is a lot more employment happening for AI related expertise that is not being advertised, that is not being hired from the outside in. We're seeing that start to change now that it's been a long enough time that people actually can say they've had experience and can have actually had experience. A year ago, we weren't there. It was all, branding. Now it's more than branding, but the branding part is important. I think that there will be more jobs out there. They will start with lawyer jobs that will be heavily involved in regulatory issues related to AI. Those will be the first kind of wave of mid-market jobs that we see. But keep in mind, your best way to get AI employment is probably at your current employer right now. That's probably your best avenue, is figuring out a way to transition internally and leverage your institutional knowledge in order to contribute meaningfully in a different way to the business that you know so well. And that would be the argument that I would make to the stakeholders necessary in order to get that promotion or reconfigurement of position. But look, if you're out there hoping to see 19,000 to 44,000 jobs posted for AI governance in the next 12 months, it's not going to happen. It will be far thinner. And most of the jobs that people have now with AI in the title, they were not hired into, but rather moved into. Now, again, once those people start moving around, that'll change, and there'll be open positions, and people will go to the outside in and know that they can get talent that has some experience. But right now, the best thing you can do is be resourceful and try to advocate internally for that experience as much as you can, and then leverage it later if you don't want to stay at your current employer for whatever reason. Jay, it has been such a pleasure hanging out with you and getting to know you. and hearing your perspective, which is incredibly valuable. Thank you to everybody who's joined us and stuck around for a few minutes over. For questions we didn't answer, we'll try to get to you offline, and we appreciate your thoughts. Join us next month for another edition of Eye on Privacy. Jay, I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jared. It was fun. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, everyone, and I really enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone.